takes me home, the light that guides the way, the thought of you alone.
Hello, everybody. This is Taimoor with another exciting episode of the podcast called Let's Talk About You. And today I have a special guest with me, Mr. Sriram. And we're going to talk about a few things with Sriram, starting with, his passion about soccer. He has a very keen eye on sports. And he's like a brother to me, so I'm fortunate that he has joined us today. So, just a little bit about Sriram before we get started. He actually plays soccer for the Webster University here in St. Louis, Missouri, and he's also a great cricketer. We're lucky that he plays, for our club, and also, a great analyst and sort of, I would say, uh, he analyzes the sport quite deeply, and it's always a pleasure for me to hear his analysis every time we're either on the cricket field or whenever we get a chance to hang out. It's always a good discussion. So, Sriram, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure having you. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Taimoor Bhai. I'm doing good. Glad to be on your show, and yeah, thanks for the high compliments. I don't know if I deserve that much praise, but I do enjoy it, thinking and talking about sports.
No, it's my pleasure. So, Sriram, we're going to talk about cricket in a little bit, but I also wanted to, highlight the fact that you play soccer for Webster University, and you're the goalkeeper in that team. So, can you tell me a little bit about your passion about soccer and how that started? Because you come from India, and as we all know, in subcontinent, cricket is quite big. So, how did you basically find your passion in soccer, especially when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think to start with, from the first sporting event that I went to live, um, I just felt like the energy of the crowd and everything, and I wanted to be in the middle of that. I wanted to be causing the celebration or the excitement or whatever you want to call it. So from an early age, I really wanted to be make it in professional sports. When I was born in the United States and I was here for a few years until I was 6 or 7. So I went to a couple of sporting events, a couple of ice hockey games, and a baseball game while I was here. And then when we moved to India, obviously the sports on offer changed quite a bit. So and my options became pretty much cricket and football and basketball to an extent, but football as in soccer. So yeah, I think cricket, there's already plenty of people playing, and the country had a good cricket team and was well represented, and I wanted to somehow contribute to the country by making it in a different sport, you could say. So it kind of drew me to soccer. And yeah, so since I think I would say third grade, I had that kind of motivation to play soccer and improve and make it at some level in my mind, and that carried forward um, every year and until I eventually ended up in St. Louis playing collegiate soccer at Webster University.
And it's a pretty big deal that you're part of that collegiate sports setup in the US, because it's not easy to get in, that like at that level of sports. Doesn't matter which sport you're playing. So I think definitely kudos to you that you put in so much hard work and it finally paid off. The fact that you're now playing for Webster. So Sriram, I'm assuming that when you were in India, you obviously, like you mentioned, you played a lot of sports, but you must have been really good in soccer, and you must have played for your schools there as well.
Yeah, yeah, I started everything was through the school pretty much earlier on, especially. So like I said, third grade, I joined. Our school had like what you would call PE
Hmm.
periods. So every week we had two or three of those, and you had to choose amongst the different sports on offer, and I chose soccer. And yeah, so that meant I played soccer like a couple of times a week in front of our school coach with some teammates and friends. And from that, they chose a school team, and we represented our school in all the age categories growing up. And that was kind of my only real introduction to the sport for a long time. We played a couple of tournaments a year, not much, but during those few tournaments, I would think this is the end of the world kind of thing, like the biggest thing stage ever. If I do well, then I'll go to the next level, whatever. Um, and that kind of carried forward. And then finally, I realized, okay, in the school level, we're not getting enough opportunity, especially my school. We didn't go for as many tournaments as I hoped to, or as some of the other schools are going to. So I joined the club set up in eighth or ninth grade. In eighth grade, I think. And then in ninth grade, that club started almost a residential academy of sorts. So there was like a residential section, and then there was commuters. So I was a commuter. I didn't want to give up my the school I went to for that. So, but that was year round. We trained 3 times a week, played a game on weekends, and that kind of introduced me to the soccer scene in Bangalore in India, and yeah, that carried that forward until 12th grade.
Nice. So Sriram, when you moved to the US, when you moved back to the US, I should say, because you were born here, um, what was the difference that you felt in, the level of, I should say, competition here versus what you saw back home?
I would say here, 100% people are more athletic, faster, stronger. Does that mean they're better at the sport? I can't say. But I think with a lot of the teams I played in India, in under 15, under 18, all those age groups, there were 2 or 3 players who are very good. They could hold their own in a lot of the age group teams that in the rest of India, maybe here as well. But in the team that I played in here in Webster University's team, I would say there were definitely 2, 3 people who were like that, quite good, but everyone was around the same level. So it was quite competitive. There wasn't much to distinguish um, between players. In the teams back home, back in India, I would say the difference between players could be bigger. So there was a bit of a gap there amongst players within the same team.
I see. And then the fact that, you were able to make it to your college's team, how much, like, what was that feeling when you learned that you have made it to the team? Because like you're saying that, the difference is much smaller here compared to what you saw in India. So it must have been a good feeling, the fact that, you made it to that level, and the self-assuring feeling that yes, you do belong there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was a US citizen, and I didn't feel I was good enough to make it professionally. So I needed like an intermediate step, which happened to be the best path I felt was playing collegiate soccer, because you get your education, you're not falling behind in that aspect, and you play at a competitive level. So yeah, I applied. It was during COVID, so there was very limited opportunity to train and all that kind of a lot of uncertainty. So during that time, first I applied to all my like universities which I wanted to make academically, which probably meant I wouldn't be playing soccer there, either because their soccer team was too good for my level or because they didn't have men's soccer. And once I got in, applied and got in, and I was pretty secure with my with what I needed to do in that time in applying to colleges wise, I just sent out emails to a lot of colleges which I thought I could make um, athletically, which I was capable of making. And out of those, a few of them responded, and one of them was Webster. And it seemed to work out. The coach seemed enthusiastic to have me on the team. And yeah, and then ultimately I decided, okay, I should, like, I looked at myself at what, 17, 18 years old. I was like, 4 years ago, I was 13 or 14. This is where I was. Now I've reached this far. How will I know good I can be 4 years from now if I don't even try? If I go to one of the more academic universities and give up soccer? And so yeah, I decided to come to Webster, and it was a good feeling because a lot of the people I grew up with, we all used to talk about how we all will play soccer and make it one day. And of all those people, everyone either quit in ninth grade when board exams are coming up, or after 10th grade or after 12th grade. And I felt, okay, from where I started, I've come quite far. And of course, it only felt like um, a part of the path It didn't feel like the final like step or anything. But
Mhm.
yeah, it definitely was gave me more motivation to train and play for more years.
Well, I'm glad that you chose Webster because we got to know you, we got to meet you here in St. Louis, and I can speak for the team as well, the club that we play for, the cricket I'm talking about. That all of us are very thankful that you are in St. Louis. So shifting gears towards cricket now, and the fact that you mentioned about athleticism. So I want to let my audiences know that Sriram is by far, one of the most athletic persons that I've seen on the field. A few of the catches that Sriram has taken just this past year were just unbelievable. And one in particular that we all remember, Sriram, is the one you took in the final of T25 tournament. Not just in St. Louis, but all across, like wherever I've played cricket in the US, I think that's the best catch I've ever seen. So you are definitely the one of the most athletic people that I've seen. So one more thing I would like to let our audiences know that I actually met Sriram on the cricket ground. Some of us were there for net practice, and I saw Sriram bowling in the nets. And even though Sriram bowls off spin for the team, that day Sriram was actually bowling fast. So, Sriram, can you tell us a little bit about how that transition actually happened? I mean, you were supposed to be a fast bowler, but you ended up playing for us as a spinner. And again, I remember seeing you bowling pace. So, how did that transition happen, from being a pace bowler to bowling off spin?
Yeah, I mean, I only really played tennis ball cricket growing up in India. We used to play in the tennis court or in the soccer field, very small one. So it was always a risk of the ball going out of the playing area and hitting a house or window or something. So we changed the rules when we got older to playing one pitch one or no sixes, only fours allowed. If you hit a six, you're out. And we also included one pitch one hand. And with those rules, if you bowl fast, it's pretty tough to control your batting and quite one sided in terms of facing the fast bowling. So we made a rule that you can only bowl slow, which meant if you want to get wickets or do well, you have to bowl spin. So I pretty much bowled spin throughout, and I have long fingers, and I used to bowl carom balls and off spin, and mostly carom balls. I used to loop it and tempt batsmen to hit sixes. And over here, I initially started playing cricket. Like this is my fourth year in St. Louis. I only started playing after my third year, or after my third soccer season, because I had injured my ankle and it was a chronic injury. It was taking some time to heal, and I was quite annoyed at not being able to play soccer. So I thought, okay, I'll play cricket to whatever extent I can. So I was bowling fast that day, honestly, because I wanted to see what it felt like to bowl a bouncer to a batsman with a hard ball. Because obviously, watching cricket on TV, it's not the same as playing tennis ball cricket at home. So I think I had watched the documentary, and I'd seen Geoffrey Archer bounce Smith and Labuschagne. So I wanted to see what it was like to bowl a bouncer, and I didn't have the pace to bowl a bouncer, but I think that's why I was bowling fast that day. But by the time our season started, my ankle injury only got worse, so I couldn't run and bowl fast. So I told our captain Sadbhai that I'm available to play if you don't have enough players, but I can't bowl fast and I can't run. So if you have space for a spinner who can field in the infield, probably in the slips, and bat last, then I'm in, and that's how it started.
I definitely remember that. And it's interesting how things work out because that's how it was meant to be. And you ended up being a very successful, off spin bowler, not just for our team, but also for the whole league in that tournament. Um, just the practice game that we played a few weeks ago, you opened the bowling and you actually had one of the other players stumped in the first over. And if I'm not wrong, I think that was the carom ball, right? Because it must have gone out because he went outside the crease and he got stumped. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that was just a normal ball. Because I try not to bowl a carom ball uh, in the first over or first few overs, because I think I used to earlier on, like our first few games, I was very eager to show my variation and see if it worked. But I thought I was losing a bit of control. And also, there was one game when I bowled quite well with just the regular off breaks, and when I brought the variations in, it it gave up some loose deliveries. So I thought, okay, if my stock ball is going well, I don't need to change anything until it becomes a matter of suspense for the batter. So I think that day I just bowled slow off spin. I just think the batter, just lost his patience waiting for the ball to reach him. So he came out and tried to hit it, and I think it dropped on him. And Adil Bhai did a great job to gather and stump him.
Right. So, Sriram, you mentioned that you watched that documentary called Test, which I believe is probably one of the best documentaries ever made. Really gives you, a good insight about what goes on in the dressing room. And no matter how much we love cricket, there's ODI, there's T20, now there's T10 as well. But there's nothing like Test cricket. For somebody who doesn't like cricket, the idea of, a game being played for 5 days could be a bit boring and could be a bit of a stretch. But for those of us who actually love watching cricket and playing cricket, nothing beats Test cricket. And we've seen the documentary and we've seen like some really good series played just recently.
Excuse me.
And no worries. And then the Border Gavaskar Trophy that just concluded last week was, is a great example of that. Broke so many records. More than 350,000 people watching just one game of cricket. The Boxing Day Test, and just every test in that series just kept breaking records one after another. So, I mean, I'm not from India, but I do like watching good cricket. And for more than 10 years, every time Australia and India play, even if I have to stay up late at night, I would stay up just to watch that competition because it has become something different. Yes, the two teams have played good cricket in the past too, but for the last, I would say 15 to 16 years, that competition has become something else. The rivalry and the fierceness, I should say that you see on the cricket ground when those two teams are playing is something different. So, how do you being somebody who not only plays cricket, but also, like I was saying earlier, that you have a very keen eye and you analyze games, quite well as well, quite in detail too. So, how do you like sum up the competition that we just saw between India and Australia over the last five tests?
Yeah, actually, this was the first test series that I followed so closely. I think throughout my childhood, I only really watched World Cups and IPL. That's just how it was with, especially with school and everything. There wasn't much time to watch Test cricket, and my parents definitely didn't approve of spending so much time watching TV. So, yeah, I really got into Test cricket about a year ago. I would say around this time, around when Shamar Joseph pulled some magic on Australian batters last 2024, early 2024. Um, yeah, I thought it was a fantastic series. I followed a lot of podcasts after watching the game, so I'd watch the game and then wake up the next morning, watch the highlights just because I would have missed a wicket or two, and then watch podcasts talking, summarizing the game and all the everything that was going on around the game. And yeah, it felt like Australia were definitely the superior team, but India were able to hang on. Obviously, that first game, India was the superior team, but since then, it was all Australia. Despite that, India only lost 3-1. And, or they lost, India lost 3-1, but even those two losses in Melbourne and Sydney could have gone the other way. It was quite close. Um, so it was interesting, but definitely very intense. I think when I earlier on in like 2010 to 2015, when I was very young, I never saw India being that aggressive, that intense. Um, they definitely didn't have the fast bowling power to back up any intensity that they did show. So now it's definitely a change of culture, and it it makes for some really good dramatic cricket moments.
Absolutely. And I was looking at this test series a bit differently. I I I thought all along that India was a superior team and Australia just, it was Australia who was able to just hang on. And they were able to just hold their nerves at the key moments. Otherwise, like you said, especially MCG and Sydney game could have gone the other way too. So it was definitely, a series where you just could not predict a winner. I mean, except for the first test, which was quite one-sided, to be honest. But the remaining four test games in the series, it was just hard to predict who was going to win. You mentioned the intensity that, we never saw coming from India, back in the day. I remember that it was, I think, 2014, 2015 series when Virat Kohli took on Mitchell Johnson. He was able to, look into Johnson's side and was like, you know what, I'm not going to be bullied by you. And if you, try to harass me on the cricket pitch, I'll try to respond with my cricket bat. And that was absolutely amazing. I think Virat ended up scoring more than 600 runs in that series. His most against Australia in Australia. And I remember every single game in that test series. It was just amazing. The intensity also you mentioned coming in the bowling department after a long time. And when we talk about Indian bowling, of course, we have to talk about Jasprit Bumrah. So, I mean, how good is he? Just kind of, walk me through your analysis of him, like, from what you have seen, the way he was bowling in this series. I mean, he practically, had the entire Indian team on his shoulders. So, just what are your thoughts? Like, how good is Bumrah?
Yeah, I think without Bumrah, the series would have been a 5-0 whitewash, and it would have been over long before it really did conclude. Um, I think there are two ways of looking at Bumrah in my lifetime. When I initially started watching, it was Umesh Yadav, Vishant Sharma, Varun Aaron, and while they could be good on their day, they were not very accurate. They were inconsistent. India would go for runs like England, Australia, whoever they played against, South Africa, New Zealand, they would put up like 400, 500 easy every single time. And with Bumrah, like nobody could figure him out, like unless they were ramping and taking huge risks. Like there was every ball was going past the edge. Every ball could have been a wicket. It was ridiculous. I first started watching Bumrah with the Mumbai Indians in like 2014. Um, I was a Mumbai Indians fan. I don't really watch the IPL anymore. Back then, he was a young bowler with a different action, and back then, AB de Villiers was the king. He would be playing 360 shots against everyone and scoring huge runs against everyone. And when Bumrah first played against RCB, he just bowled a York. AB de Villiers walked off to the offside to try some interesting shot, and Bumrah just bowled a Yorker on the stumps and got him out. And it felt like, why couldn't anyone else do this? This is the simplest solution which we've been thinking of. Everyone who's watching is just saying bowl a Yorker on the stumps. It should be enough. And Bumrah did it, and that's what I remember of him initially. And of course, he was a big player for Mumbai Indians, one of the best bowlers in the IPL. But to see him not only do that at the test level, but also increase his pace. He increased from bowling 130 clicks to above 140 now. Um, and to see him do that at the test level consistently is quite remarkable to me. And also, yeah, like the statistics, everyone emphasized this after the series that his statistics are as good as ever. Like we're watching like 2011 Lionel Messi, we're watching 90s Michael Jordan, we're watching like the 1930s Bradman. We're watching the very best during their very best phase in their career, and his average is so low. His strike rate is so low for I think players who've played above a certain number of tests, his record is the best ever. Like this is
Mhm.
you can't compare him. Like it's ridiculous because my grandparents or my granddad used to talk about all the West Indian fast bowlers, Glenn McGrath, um, all these top fast bowlers, and we have an Indian fast bowler or Wasim Akram, Imran Khan, and now we have an Indian fast bowler who is statistically better than anyone who ever existed, which is crazy to think about. Really have to enjoy every moment because with fast bowling you never know injuries and so on and so forth.
Right. And it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that we are living in an era where we have the opportunity to actually see somebody who's as good. And even if you're not supporting that team, it's still really good to see him bowl. And with Bumrah, the thing is that he's not like a big swinger of the ball, but his line and length are so good. And the subtle movement that sometimes he gets off the pitch, that's just enough. And like you said, unless somebody's trying to take a lot of risks against him, there is no way you can play him just by standing in your crease and playing conventional footwork shots. It's just impossible. And we saw that with so many batters in this series. Like whoever was trying to play him casually just kept getting out. And that's I think that's what sets him apart is that it's so hard to. I mean, yeah, people talk about his action, that he has a different action, small run up and all that. But I think the fact that he, like, if you watch how he delivers the ball in slow motion, the seam position and the amount of revs that you can see even in slow motion, that's just amazing. So it's definitely a pleasure seeing him live in our lifetime. So Sriram, talking about the series again, we saw some excellent performances from Bumrah. We saw some really good performances from Jaiswal. We saw some really good, awesome knocks from Nitish Kumar Reddy. We saw some good debuts as well. We had Harshit Rana. We had the other fast bowler. I'm forgetting his name. But at the same time, we had a couple of players on the Indian side that just could not play up to their potential. I mean, Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli, and even KL Rahul to an extent. So starting with Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli, because they are towards the end of their careers, and people are already talking about the fact that they should be retiring, which I personally don't agree with. But I wanted to see, like, being an Indian cricket fan that you are, how do you see this whole situation with Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma, specifically with Kohli, because we saw him getting out in the same fashion, I think like 7 times in the series. So for a player or for a batter of his caliber, like why do you think it's so hard for him to just overcome that mistake? In other words, like is it too late or was it just bad luck for him? Like what do you make of the entire situation starting with Kohli?
Um, yeah, for Kohli in particular, I think someone had read somewhere that they compared it Kohli with Tendulkar and how Tendulkar played that one inning in the SCG where he didn't play a single cover drive and he ended up scoring 241 not out. And they said that Virat Kohli can't do that because he's so reliant on his front foot game that he doesn't have scoring shots on the back foot. He doesn't have a cut or he doesn't have the same skill set as Tendulkar to adjust and play scoring shots without going for that cover drive. And I think that makes sense because the few times that Kohli did um, maintain his patience and not play a cover drive for the first few overs or the first 30, 40 balls that he faced, he ended up committing that mistake at some point or the other, even after he got in, because he didn't have a way to score runs without doing it. And yeah, I think, um, yeah, he's been out of form. And not only is he not performing with the bat, but he's getting his partners run out, he's getting himself run out, he's doing things on the field which I don't think even his staunchest supporters can back or defend. I think, I don't know, he's losing a lot of respect and reputation, which I don't think is called for at all.
Right. And what about Rohit Sharma? I mean, yes, with Virat Kohli, the thing is that he kept getting out on the offside because, like you said, he's so reliant on his front foot game that it's easy to trap him. But with somebody like Rohit Sharma, he was like, I mean, of course, every batter has their pet shots that they like to play. With Rohit Sharma, it's the pull shot, the hook shot, and the pickup shot that he plays towards the leg side. But we saw him, my analysis of Rohit Sharma was that he's probably coming too slow on the ball. Maybe he's not in the form. Maybe he's not, like quick enough anymore that he used to. But it was just sad to see him averaging only about 6.5 in the entire series, like like the 3 games that he played. So what do you make of him? Like, what is going on with Rohit Sharma at this point? Because he opened the batting, he brought himself down the order, and in both instances, he just could not score.
Rohit Sharma, I'm not sure because his test average or he only has one away test 100, one test 100 away from home, or maybe in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, England. I'm not sure, but he doesn't have good numbers to back his batting ability in Test cricket, which I don't know why he's given such a long leash. I think he's unfit. He's too comfortable. Um, and he's quite frankly taking away a spot for someone more capable. Um, yeah, I'm not sure technically what his flaws are, but he's just not, he shouldn't be in the team. And my biggest problem is that they moved on from Pujara and Rahane, citing that it was time to bring in younger players, and they did that. They brought in Jaiswal, Shubman Gill was already there. But yeah, and they brought Sarfaraz Khan. They brought younger players, which I respect. But if that's the case, why are they keeping Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli? I mean, Virat Kohli has shown that he can do it at a very good level, of course. But so has Pujara and Rahane. I don't understand why they couldn't keep those two if they could keep Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli, or at least bring them on the tour and use them if needed. And with Rohit Sharma, when Jaiswal dropped that catch, couple of catches he dropped in MCG, um, instead of putting his arm around him and saying it's fine, another one will come, he's sh- outwardly expressing his frustration
Hmm.
on the field as a 30-odd-year-old captain who's won a lot of games for India. I just don't understand that at all. And I know for a fact Rahane would have put his arm around Jaiswal and supported him in a situation like that, especially when Jaiswal has taken plenty of difficult catches in that same area. So he can do it. He knows he can do it. In that moment, sometimes it slips out. You don't have much time to think about it. 1 second is there, next second it's on the ground. I don't understand why experienced players like that who aren't even performing themselves have the audacity to express their frustration and bring down their team morale.
Right. And it's also not the first time that Rohit Sharma has done that. I remember 2 years ago, there was an Asia Cup game against Pakistan when Arshdeep Singh dropped the catch of Iftikhar, I think. I think it was. And even in that game, Rohit Sharma, like you said, very outwardly expresses feelings. So he has a tendency to sort of lose control sometimes. And if I'm playing under a captain like that, I would be very uncomfortable, and I would be very scared. Even, I mean, I would try to avoid the ball as much as I can because I would know that, okay, if I drop a catch, I'm going to be taken to cleaners in front of everybody in the ground. So, so that's always tricky. But talking about Jaiswal, I mean, man, the way he batted, and I'm going to say entire series. Yes, in a couple of innings, he got out pretty cheaply, but his intent, his concentration, his focus, and the range of shots that he has, whether it's on the offside, straight, leg side, everything. It was just a treat to watch. And the fact that, he took on the Australian bowlers on their home turf was something that I hadn't seen in a long time. Even Virat Kohli, he was slightly older than how like what Jaiswal is right now when Virat Kohli did the same thing against the Aussie bowlers. So how do you look at Jaiswal? He's like what, 20 to 20 years old, I think. He has at least 13, 14 years of cricket ahead of him, given that he remains fit. But if he keeps playing like this, he's going to be a next superstar. I think he's slightly underrated. Um, people. praise and talk about Shubman Gill a lot more than Jaiswal, but I think Jaiswal deserves a lot more given that he has shown he can score runs when nobody else around him was able to do so. So how do you look at Jaiswal and the intensity and the reliance, I should say, that he brings into the Indian batting order?
Yeah, I think he's a top player. He seems very secure about his batting. He knows exactly what he needs to do, and he's very confident. And he's really worked hard to reach where he is today. So he's not gonna give it up easy. He's in India. He's very good. In the West Indies, he was quite good. That's when he made his debut, if I remember correctly. And in Australia, he had some difficulties, but he also had some great knocks. That 80 that he got run out on could have gone even further. We don't know. And the he had a big century as well. Next, he'll be challenged in England, so we'll see how he can cope with that. Obviously, swing is more of a factor there. But yeah, I think he's very good front foot, very good square of the wicket. He's fit. He can take good catches in the cordon and at gully. He's vocal. It seems like everything is in place. With Shubman Gill, he's done it for a few years more. So I think that's the reason there's so much hype around him. He did it in the World Cup. He did it in the previous Australia series. This time around, not so much. But he also played fewer games. Not sure what's the problem with him. He's out of form. But yeah, Jaiswal looks good. Yeah, if he keeps playing this way, he's one to be really look promising, or one to look
Yeah,
forward to.
absolutely. And the other player who really impressed me in this series was Nitish Kumar Reddy. um, you know, coming down the order under so much pressure when your team is not scoring runs and be able to score that many runs. And not only, that he was scoring runs, he was actually playing really positive cricket. He was hitting the Aussie ballers all around the ground, all over the ground, I should say. And, he was not slogging. He knew the shots that he was playing and he was very successful with that. Um, so how do you rate him? I mean, he has filled a lot of gaps, in my opinion, in the Indian cricket team. But I wanted to get from an Indian fan, like how do you see him, and how is the reception of his performance in India? I'm sure you have a lot of friends back home. So how do you what kind of stuff do you hear about him, especially after this series?
Yeah, he's a very interesting one because I think he was brought in as a bowling all rounder, and he ended up keeping his spot for the MCG test um, because of his batting, and his batting was considered to be better than Shubman Gill's for him to keep that spot because Shubman Gill was dropped and he was still in the squad, so they they considered his batting because his bowling was not anything to shout out about based on the previous tests. So they kept him in the squad purely for his batting, and which they considered at the time to be better than Shubman Gill's. And he proved it by hitting a big 100, which nearly saved the test for India or even put them in the driving seat for a certain point of time. And yeah, that's a big. I think after that day's play, there were a lot of smiles on Indians' faces. It's always fun to celebrate. That's the thing with Test cricket. Like, of course, you want your team to win, but sometimes your team drawing can also be a source of excitement, a source of accomplishment. Your team avoiding follow-on can be a source of accomplishment. Your debutant slash young players scoring a century, or any player scoring a century, could be a source of enjoyment and source of victory. And certainly, any Indian watching that game that day felt that way. His dad was in the crowd to watch him, and he was emotional. When that I think that whole scene when Siraj had to block out three balls, and then everyone's obviously focused on that, and then the next over, him coming down and lofting over mid on for his century was probably one of the highlights for India during the series for sure. And I called some of my relatives to wish them Happy New Year, and I was able to speak about bring up cricket to some of my uncles, and a lot of them were really enthusiastic about this Test series. They said that they've got back into watching Test cricket after that Perth Test, and it was around that time that um, Nitish Kumar Reddy had hit the 100. So we're talking about that, and they were all complimenting him about how his stroke play is really good. However, since then, he did have two disappointing innings when India could have used some more runs from him. But of course, he's shown that he can do it in Australia against a top bowling attack. So that's something that shouldn't be ignored in the future.
Absolutely. And on the Australian side, I think Pat Cummins is a great captain. He has shown it over and over again. The bowling changes that he makes, and especially the fact that he brings himself on when it's needed the most. I mean, he's not somebody who shies away from taking a chance. If he sees the opposition down, he tries to go for the kill right away. So I think he's shown us over and over again that he understands the game quite well, and his record shows it. Speaks for itself. But there's one player in Australian side that I just really wanted to talk about, and that's Scott Boland. He's always seen as a backup for Josh Hazelwood, but every time he's picked, he's taken a lot of wickets, and especially the Sydney Test. He took 10 wickets in that Test match. So, like, what are your thoughts on him? Like, how do you see Boland? And my specific question would be that: is it fair to keep looking at Boland as Hazelwood's backup, or do you think it's about time that he starts, like Australians start making him like the main part of the bowling attack, and maybe look at Hazelwood as a backup, because Hazelwood keeps getting injured quite a bit, especially for the last few years. But Boland is very consistent. He's fit, and he puts a long yard. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Scott Boland definitely was Australia's best bowler whenever he played. He just seems to be automatic in hitting that length, and it reminds me of Shani Bai from our team. Um, like
Absolutely.
he just makes the batsman uncomfortable and creates problems for them. It's interesting because Hazelwood, I think, was statistically Australia's best bowler coming into the series, and once he got injured, he replaced him with the next or another statistically best bowler, which means that they have to replace Stark or Cummins with Boland. Obviously, Cummins is the captain. With Stark, I think Stark just brings something else. Like he brings left arm fast. He brings swing. He brings that extra speed. With Boland, it's more about hitting the length, which I think there's room for that. Especially if the Australian wickets are the way they are, maybe there's a case for having four seamers and not even having Nathan Lyon in the attack, because Nathan Lyon did not really contribute much to the series. Not his own fault, of course. It was just the way the conditions were. But yeah, I definitely see Scott Boland deserving a spot in the lineup rather than being seen as a backup. But depends on where they play and the conditions and fitness and so on.
So, so Sriram, lastly, I did want to talk about the South Africa versus Pakistan. That series was not as exciting as BGT. And frankly, myself being a Pakistani cricket fan, I knew what the results were going to be. So there was, if at all, there was only a false hope that Pakistan could have, could be able to pull off something really special in that series. I mean, I would say the first Test match we, should have won. I mean, they were 99 for 8, and then the last 2 wickets ended up scoring the rest of the runs, so that was very disappointing. But I wanted to understand from you, like somebody who's looking at that game as a third person, essentially. You're not South African, you're not Pakistani, you're an Indian cricket fan, but you still have a good eye for the game of cricket, in general. So a lot of times, us fans, we get emotional, about our favorite players. But at the same time, I think it's good to be objective in our analysis. It's good to be critical when it's needed. So, when you look at the way Pakistan plays, especially in the Test series, any Test series outside of Pakistan, what do you think is holding Pakistan cricket team back? When where like they're not able to put in the same level of competition that we see from the likes of India, Australia, and even Sri Lanka, in many cases. So what do you think, is the thing that's holding back Pakistan from being able to compete like the other teams do?
I think fielding is definitely the number one. I think even in the past, India's fielding was very poor, and that was a large reason why India used to lose against the likes of Australia. And if you look at Australia's fielding, like a lot of times when batters were under pressure and they'd play one good shot, well-timed shot, someone or the other would dive and stop it, and or reduce the boundary to a single or a double, which is huge because like that's like a huge mental victory for the fielding team, and that's kind of a huge source of success for a lot of the for teams like Australia, especially. I think India has crept up in that regard by huge margins, even in the past 5-10 years. I think Pakistan have great bowling performances, good batting performances, but the fielding always lets them down. I think if they can make good strides in that area, then that'll um, put a lot more pressure on the opposition rather than on themselves. Um, Other than that, um, I think the lack of leadership is another key thing. In India, I know Dhoni wasn't the best test captain, but I don't think anyone really argued with him on the field or in the dressing room. And Kohli as well won the respect of his peers. And even Rohit Sharma definitely won the respect of his peers in white ball cricket. I don't know so much about Test cricket, but I think that has translated to Test cricket to a certain degree. Just the nature of how Indians would rather see World Cup wins than Test wins. Um, and I think in Pakistan, they need that kind of figure who everyone can respect. I thought Babar Azam had that, but like in the past year or so, that doesn't seem to be the case. I think Shan Masood is really good. If he can be consistent with the bat, then he can make a case for himself. But it's just a question of whether the other seniors in the team will be able to respect and listen to him as much as they should um, if he's the captain.
Right. And I also think, Sriram, that in addition to the fielding being the weak link, it's also the lack of mental strength in the Pakistani team. I think these players get under pressure pretty quickly. And I mean, if you remember the T20 World Cup in 2022, that famous game between India and Pakistan at MCG, I mean, India needed 28 runs on 8 balls. Um, in any situation, that's basically an impossible task, given that Pakistan was bowling so good. But just a couple of bad balls from Haris Rauf, and frankly, the first one was not even a bad ball. It was actually a really good shot by Virat Kohli. But it's just that I mean, India still needed 22 runs on 7 balls, but the shoulders went down pretty quickly. So I think that, it's like in addition to all the technical things that you mentioned, it's also the mental strength that Pakistani team lacks. And I think there's lack of confidence as well. I mean, with India, there's IPL, there's an opportunity for the Indian players to play against the best, and not just against the best, but alongside the best in the world for about 2 or 3 months. So I think that must give them a lot of confidence and help them basically up their skill both mentally and physically. So I just feel that in addition to the fielding issues, there's also lack of mental strength. And I mean, you play in our club that has a lot of Pakistanis, and I think the fielding is probably a genetic issue with most of us. So I'm sure some of the players watching this podcast would agree with me. But anyways, Sriram, I appreciate you giving us your time and especially your analysis on some of the things that we talked about. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you one last question. We started off this discussion, with soccer, and I have to ask you that, like, what is your favorite team, and also like who's your favorite player, uh, both all time and also in the current setup.
My favorite team is Chelsea, and Sunil Chetri is probably my favorite player just because he's done so much for Indian football. But in Chelsea terms, I would say Eden Hazard was the best player or the most enjoyable player to watch while during my years of watching Chelsea. Right now, there are few good players, and the team is definitely performing better, but none of them would compare to Hazard and the emotion and the joy that he brought to us, no matter where we were watching him from. So
Right. I used to follow Chelsea back in like 2005, 2006 timeframe. Joe Terry was there, Frank Lampard was my favorite, and Drogba was there too. And for some time, Jose Mourinho was the coach. So I think that was probably my favorite time in English Premier League because I used to follow Chelsea quite a bit. But I'm glad to hear. It's very rare to find another Chelsea fan. Most of the people that I know either follow. I mean, I followed Manchester United quite a bit too, but most of the people that I know here are either Barcelona fans or maybe Liverpool, Arsenal. Manchester City seems to be getting a lot of followers these days, but it's rare to find another Chelsea fan. So I'm really glad to hear that. So yeah, thanks again, Sriram. I hope you have a fun few days left of the break, and I hope that the weather clears out soon as well, so that we can hit the nets again and get ready for the cricket season, which I'm really looking forward to this year. I think it's going to be fun.
yeah, for sure. Watching all the Test cricket in the past few weeks has really motivated me to play cricket. Of course, the weather, it's snow everywhere right now, so we have to hold back on those emotions. But yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to talk about myself and about cricket with you. Um, Hope to join you for more episodes in the future.
Absolutely, anytime, man. And I'd be more than happy to have you back again. And I'm sure the people listen to this podcast would also love to hear more from you. And as soon as the weather clears up, I'm actually thinking about scheduling a 2-day game. The idea that you brought up last year, we're definitely going to work on that this time around. It's going to be in St. Louis, but we're gonna have a chance to try out our own test cricket here in St. Louis. So should be fun.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get to bowl a spell more than 2, 3 overs. So yeah, I'm
Oh,
excited for that.
absolutely. You'll be bowling all day, man. All right. Well, thank you again, Sriram, and thanks to all of you who are watching and listening to us today. Leave us your comments, your feedback, and give us a thumbs up as well. It's always a pleasure talking to Sriram, and I'm really glad that he was able to join us today. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, that's all from us, and I hope you guys have a good night.
You're the life that brings me home, the light that guides the way, the thought of you.